Hey friends, we got cut off yesterday. I couldn't, again, can't put it in airplane mode right now because I'm uploading another vid. I think I'm about where we were before we got cut off. Silent, gaunt, and grim, Dan did his daily task, ate his bitter bread, and obeyed commands with a rebellious flash of the eye that made the warden say, "That's a dangerous man. Watch him. He'll break out someday." There were others more dangerous than he because older in crime and ready for any desperate outbreak to change the monotony of long sentences. These men soon divined Dan's mood and, in the mysterious way convicts invent, managed to convey to him before a month was over that plans were being made for a mutiny at the first opportunity. Thanksgiving Day was one of the few chances for them to speak together as they enjoyed an hour of freedom in the prison yard. Then all would be settled and the rash attempt made if possible, probably to end in bloodshed and defeat for most, but liberty for a few. Dan had already planned his own escape and bided his time, growing more and more moody, fierce, and rebellious, as loss of liberty wore upon soul and body for the sudden change from his free, healthy life to such a narrow, gloomy, and miserable one could not have had a terrible effect, could not but have a terrible effect upon one of Dan's temperament and age. He brooded over his ruined life, gave up all his happy hopes and plans, felt that he could never face dear old Plumfield again, or touch those friendly hands with the stain of blood upon his own. He did not care for the wretched man whom he had killed, and of course that was an accident, and the man had it coming to him, a good slap upside the head. But the disgrace of prison would never be wiped out of his misery, though the cropped hair would grow again, the gray suit easily be replaced, and the bolts and bars left far behind. "It's all over with me. I've spoilt my life. Now let it go. I'll give up the fight and get what pleasure I can anywhere, anyhow. They shall think me dead and so still care for me, but never know what I am. Poor Mother Bear, she tried to help me, but it's no use. The firebrand can't be saved." And dropping his head in his hands, he sat on his low bed. Dan would mourn over all he had lost in tearless misery, till merciful sleep would comfort him with dreams of the happy days when the boys played together, or those still later and happier ones when all smiled on him and Plumfield seemed to have gained a new and curious charm. There was one poor fellow in Dan's shop whose fate was harder than his, for his sentence expired in the spring, but there was little hope of his living till that time, and the coldest-hearted man pitied poor Mason as he sat coughing his life away in that close place, and counting the weary days yet to pass before he could see his wife and little child again. There was some hope that he might be pardoned out, but he had no friends to bestir themselves in the matter, and it was evident that the great judge's pardon would soon end his patient pain forever. Dan pitied him more than he dared to show, for this one tender emotion in that dark time was like the little flower that sprung up between the stones of the prison yard and saved the captive from despair in the beautiful old story. Dan helped Mason with his work when he was too feeble to finish his task, and the grateful look that thanked him was a ray of sunshine to cheer his cell when he was alone. Mason envied the splendid health of his neighbor and mourned to see it wasting there. He was a peaceful soul and tried, as far as a whispered word or warning glance could do it, to deter Dan from joining the bad lot, as the rebels were called. But having turned his face from the light, Dan found the downward way easy, and took a grim satisfaction in the prospect of a general outbreak, during which he might revenge himself upon the tyrannical warden and strike a blow for his own mercy, feeling that an hour of insurrection would be a welcome vent for the pent-up passions that tormented him. He had tamed many a wild animal, but his own lawless spirit was too much for him, till he found the curb that made him master of all. The Sunday before Thanksgiving, as he sat in chapel, Dan observed several guests in the seats reserved for them, and looked anxiously to see if any familiar face was there, for he had a mortal fear that someone from home would suddenly confront him. No, all were strangers, and he soon forgot them in listening to the chaplain's cheerful words and the sad singing of many heavy hearts. People often spoke to the convicts, so it caused no surprise when, on being invited to address them, one of the ladies rose and said she would tell them a little story, which announcement caused the younger listeners to pack up their ears, and even the older ones to look interested, for any change in their monotonous life was welcome. The speaker was a middle-aged woman in black, with a sympathetic face, eyes full of compassion, and a voice that seemed to warm the heart. Because of certain motherly tones in it, she reminded Dan of Mrs. Joe, and he listened intently to her every word, feeling that each was meant for him, because by chance they came at that moment when he needed a softening memory to break up the ice of despair which was blighting all the good impulses of his nature. It was a simple little story, but it caught the men's attention at once, being about two soldiers in a hospital during the late war, both badly wounded in the right arm and both anxious to save these breadwinners and go home unmaimed. One was patient, docile, and cheerfully obeyed orders. Even when told that the arm must go, he submitted, and after much suffering recovered, grateful for life, though he could fight no more. The other rebelled, would listen to no advice, and having delayed too long, died a lingering death, bitterly regretting his folly when it was too late. Now, as all stories should have a little moral, let me tell you mine, added the lady with a smile as she looked at the row of young men before her, sadly wondering what had brought them there. This is a hospital for soldiers wounded in life's battle. Here are sick souls, weak wills, insane passions, blind consciousness, all the ills that come from broken laws, bringing their inevitable pain and punishment with them. There is hope and help for everyone, for God's mercy is infinite and man's charity is great. But penitence and submission must come before the cure is possible. Pay the forfeit manfully, for it is just, but from the suffering and shame wring new strength for a nobler life. The scar will remain, but it is better for a man to lose both arms than his soul. And these hard years, instead of being lost, may be made the most precious of your lives if they teach you to rule yourselves. Oh, friends, try to outlive the bitter past, to wash the sin away and begin anew, if not for your own sakes, for that of the dear mothers, wives, and children who wait and hope so patiently for you. Remember them, and do not let love and long in vain. And if there be any so forlorn that they have no friend to care for them, never forget the Father, whose arms are always open to receive, forgive, and comfort his prodigal sons, even at the 11th hour. There the little sermon ended, but the preacher of it felt that her few hearty words had not been uttered in vain, for one boy's head was down, and several faces wore the softened look which told that a tender memory was touched. Dan was forced to set his lips to keep them steady and drop his eyes to hide the sudden dew that dimmed them when waiting, hoping friends were spoken of. He was glad to be alone in his cell again, and sat thinking deeply instead of trying to forget himself in sleep. It seemed as if those words were just what he needed to show him where he stood, and how fateful the next few days might be to him. Should he join the bad lot and perhaps add another crime to one already committed, lengthen the sentence already so terrible to bear, deliberately turn his back on all that was good and mar the future that might yet be redeemed? Or should he, like the wiser man in the story, submit, bear the just punishment, try to be better for it, and though the scar would remain, it might serve as a reminder of a battle not wholly lost, since he had saved his soul, though innocence was gone? Then he would dare go home, perhaps confess, and find fresh strength in the pity and consolation of those who never gave him up. Oh, I hope he doesn't try to break out. Good and evil fought for Dan that night, as did the angel and the devil for Centrum, and it was hard to tell whether lawless nature or loving heart would conquer. Remorse and resentment, shame and sorrow, pride and passion made a battlefield of that narrow cell, and the poor fellow felt as if he had fiercer enemies to fight now than any he had met in all his wanderings. A little thing turned the scale, as it so often does in these mysterious hearts of ours, and a touch of sympathy helped Dan decide the course which would bless or ban his life. In the dark hour before the dawn, as he lay wakeful on his bed, a ray of light shone through the bars, the bolts turned softly, and a man came in. It was the good chaplain, led by the same instinct that brings a mother to her sick child's pillow. For long experience as nurse of souls had taught him to see the signs of a hope in the hard faces about him, and to know when the moment came for a helpful word and the cordial of sincere prayer that brings such comfort and healing to tried and troubled hearts. He had been to Dan before at unexpected hours, but always found him sullen, indifferent, or rebellious, and had gone away. Doggone it. Gone away to patiently bide his time. Now it had come. A look of relief was in the prisoner's face as the light shone on it, and the sound of a human voice was strangely comfortable after listening to the whispers of the passions, doubts, and fears which had haunted the cell for hours, dismaying Dan by their power and showing him how much he needed help to fight the good fight, since he had no armor of his own. Kent, poor Mason, has gone. Remember, he went by a different name. He left a message for you, and I felt impelled to come and give it now because I think you were touched by what we heard today and in need of the help Mason tried to give you, said the chaplain, taking the one seat and fixing his kind eyes on the grim figure in the bed. Thank you, sir, I'd like to hear it, was all Dan's answer, but he forgot himself in pity for the poor fellow dead in prison, with no last look at wife or child. He went suddenly, but remembered you and begged me to say these words. Tell him not to do it, but to hold on, do his best, and when his time is out, go right to Mary, and she'll make him welcome for my sake. He's got no friends in these parts and will feel lonesome, but a woman's always safe and comfortable when a fellow's down on his luck. Give him my love and goodbye, for he was kind to me, and God will bless him for it. And then he died quietly, and tomorrow we'll go home with God's pardon, since man's came too late. So he wants him to go to his wife. Dan said nothing, but laid his arm across his face and lay quite still, seeing that the pathetic little message had done its work even better than he hoped. The chaplain went on, unconscious how soothing his paternal voice was to the poor prisoner, who longed to go home but felt he had forfeited the right. I hope you won't disappoint this humble friend whose last thought was for you. I know there's trouble brewing, and fear that you may be tempted to lend a hand on the wrong side. Don't do it, for the plot will not succeed. It never does. and it would be a pity to spoil your record, which is fair so far. Keep up your courage, my son, and go out at the year's end better, not worse, for this hard experience. Remember, a grateful woman waits to welcome and thank you if you have no friends of your own. If you have, do your best for their sake, and let us ask God to help you as He only can. Then, waiting for no answer, the good man prayed heartily, and Dan listened as he never had before. For the lonely hour, the dying message, the sudden uprising of his better self made it seem as if some kind angel had come to save and comfort him. After that night, there was a change in Dan, though no one knew it but the chaplain, for to all the rest he was the same silent, stern, unsocial fellow as before, and turning his back on the bad and the good alike, found his only pleasure in the books his friend brought him. Slowly as the steadfast drop wears away the rock, the patient kindness of this man won Dan's confidence, and led by him, he began to climb out of the valley of humiliation towards the mountains, whence through the clouds one can catch glimpses of the celestial city, whither all true pilgrims, sooner or later, turn their wistful eyes and stumbling feet. There were many backslidings, many struggles with giant despair and fiery Apollyon, many heavy hours when life did not seem worth living and Mason's escape the only hope. But through all, the grasp of a friendly hand, the sound of a brother's voice, the unquenchable desire to atone for the past by a better future and win the right to see home again kept poor Dan to his great task as the old year drew to its end, and the new waited to turn another leaf in the book whose hardest lesson he was learning now. At Christmas he yearned so for Plumfield that he devised a way to send a word of greeting to cheer their anxious hearts and comfort his own. He wrote to Mary Mason, who lived in another state, asking her to mail the letter he enclosed. In it, he merely said he was well and busy, had given up the farm and had other plans, which he would tell later, would not be home before autumn probably, nor write often, but was all right, and sent love and Merry Christmas to everyone. Then he took up his solitary life again and tried to pay his forfeit manfully. Yay! He heard that message just at the right time in church, and then the chaplain came. Just goes to show how the Lord speaks to us through others. Yay, 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 yay. Chapter 13 is called Nat's New Year. So, here's my sign. Fell back. Be sweet, don't be ugly, and I hope to see you live at 5. I also hope to see some of you at Sharon's Zoom today. Sharon's Crochet Corner. You can go to my last live. I'm sure Jen's put in her number several times, or just go to Sharon's Crochet Corner, and I'm sure she has her room number in several description boxes. See you later.